So I don't even know where to start. Well, okay, I guess I'll just start here. So in my last video, it was the first episode in a new segment that I'm doing called Monthly Movie Madness, and the idea of the segment is where at the end of the month, I just compile all the different movies that I see throughout that said month, and I talk about them in one video. I stated in that video that there would sometimes be a movie that really impacted me to the point where I would have to make one video about that said movie. And when I said that, it was talking about like a movie that impacted me in a positive way. Never did I think that the first video that I would make after the fact would be one that was negatively impacting and just god awful. Yeah, no, this is Madam Web. We're talking about Madam Web. So yeah, I saw Madam Web this weekend and I knew exactly what I was getting into because it's a Sony Marvel movie. I'm aware of what they've been doing with a lot of these Spider-Man related characters, most specifically the villains. They're making the Venom movies. They made the Morbius movie, which, wow, I'm gonna have to somewhat praise that in this video. That's surprising. And this is basically a new adaptation of taking a Spider-Man related character and giving them their own movie. Not just them being a side character in a Spider-Man movie. No, this is Madam Web's movie. She got her own movie. Wow. This is crazy. Now, I know I'm going to be talking negatively about Madam Web, but I also want to talk about Sony in this video and what Sony has been doing since 2018 and what they could be doing better, because obviously this is a strategy that just isn't working. And I don't know why they're not listening to us, because clearly after Morbius, like, you know, you think that they would take some notes as to what they could do better. And you know, just seeing this movie, it really just showcases that they don't care at all. They are just here for the money itself. They are utilizing the Spider-Man IP. So yeah, let's talk about Sony and Madam Web. So I know there's a lot of general audience members out there who still don't understand Spider-Man belonging to another studio out there, even though he is now in the MCU. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit and explain a little bit of the details as to their agreement and why we're here in the first place. So back in the late 90s to early 2000s, Marvel was going bankrupt. So in order to get a little bit more money, they decided to sell their characters to some studios. So they sold X-Men and Fantastic Four to Fox, and they sold Spider-Man to Sony. And since 2002, we've been getting an ensemble of Sony Spider-Man movies, starting with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in 2002, and luckily that was a huge success with Spider-Man 2 in 2004. But ever since 2007, we got our first stinker with Spider-Man 3. Now, I know a lot of people looking back really like that film now, considering the amount of superhero films that we've gotten in the past few years that are just not necessarily as cohesive as Spider-Man 3. But that being said, compared to Spider-Man 1 and 2, it just doesn't feel like in the same realm. This is, compared to those films, it's still kind of a bad movie. Now dig on this. So what Sony decided to do in 2010 was reboot the entire Spider-Man franchise with Andrew Garfield with the Amazing Spider-Man movies. And the first one was okay. It just kind of felt like it was the start of something new. It wasn't really anything too special. And then Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, and that was worse than Spider-Man 3. Wow. So obviously around this time, Sony didn't know what to do with the character, and the MCU was doing great things around the time Captain America, the Winter Soldier came out, and they were just like, you know what? We're gonna work together. Kevin Feige, do you want Spider-Man in your films? And they made an agreement. And that's why we're able to see Tom Holland play Spider-Man in a lot of Avengers films, because of this agreement that I have right here. I'm actually gonna read out exactly what the agreement was made. In 2019, Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios reached an agreement to bring Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The deal includes the following terms. So I think this is actually referencing what happened in 2019, where Spider-Man was gonna strictly go back to Sony. There was a little bit of concern that Tom Holland was not gonna be in the MCU anymore, but they were able to update the deal and basically move forward with Tom Holland being in the Marvel film. So this is what they made an agreement on. Sony pays Marvel $10 million for each Spider-Man movie they want to make. Marvel gets 5% of the movie's revenue. Sony and Marvel split money from Spider-Man movie toys. So I think that was actually a huge thing with Marvel, was because, you know, they weren't really getting a whole lot of money from the movies, but they were getting a significant profit from the Spider-Man merchandise, which I don't know if you guys know this, but if you make a movie and there's merch of that movie, and this is due to Star Wars logic, your merch could make 10 times more than the actual profit of the box office of the movie. So this is actually a really good deal for Marvel. So yeah, they're not making a whole lot of money with Spider-Man's involvement, but they're still gaining the money from the merchandise. Sony must start a production on a new Spider-Man movie every 5 years and 9 months. Ooh, that is actually, yeah, okay, that explains a lot. Sony receives the profits from the Spider-Man movies, while Marvel can use Spider-Man in their ensemble films. Marvel can use Spider-Man in their Disney-produced team-up films, while Sony can feature MCU characters in their films. So according to this agreement, it appears that Sony has to make a Spider-Man film every 5 years to have a hold on the character, or at least the character's earnings. And from that prompt alone, I don't really see much concern from just reading that, because it just means that Marvel is able to use Spider-Man and utilize Tom Holland in their films, and Sony is able to make their own iterations of Spider-Man. Unfortunately, they're doing this wrong. What Sony has been doing for the last 6 years is they haven't actually been utilizing Spider-Man. They've been utilizing his secondary characters, or his villains, and this started with Tom Hardy's Venom back in 2018. And yeah, okay, some people liked Venom. Out of all the Sony spinoff films, the first Venom film is okay. It's not the worst, but it's still, I don't like that movie. I actually I hated it when it came out. Now, compared to Morbius, it's a masterpiece, but when the movie came out, I was just so confused. I was like, why are we doing this? Like, why isn't Spider-Man versing Venom? Like, you know, as we know from the comics, like, Spider-Man gets the black suit, and then Eddie Brock gets it after him, and it felt weird that we were making a Venom movie when we didn't have an interpretation of Spider-Man within this universe, or so we think so far. We're going to get into that later as well. Then we got Venom Let There Be Carnage in 2021, right after the pandemic, and this film is bad in the sense of misusing their characters. So the idea of Venom versus Carnage is such a cool concept, except for the fact that they maintained the PG-13 rating of Venom from the first film. That was another thing that was wrong with the first Venom film, was that it was a PG-13 rating. If you were to make a rated R Venom film, this would be the time to do it, where you have Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer, putting on this red symbiote and killing people all over. I was severely disappointed, and I just felt like this could have been a great opportunity of utilizing another rated R-like character. We've seen it with Deadpool, we've seen it with Kick-Ass. Studios should know by now that we love rated R superhero films, but we're still getting a PG-13 Venom versus Carnage movie because they want to make money from 13-year-old boys who shop at Hot Topic. Damn it. Then we got a blessing in disguise back in 2022. Morbius with Jared Leto. This was one of the worst films ever made. People hated this film. It was god awful. It generated so many memes to the point where there was a cult following. Like, this film was so bad that people started sarcastically liking the film. It's Morbin time, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus Christ. And it was at that point where we started realizing, like, okay, Sony, you need to chill out for a second, bro. Like, this is getting kind of bad. And here we are in 2024, 2 years after the masterpiece of Morbius. Yes, I'm calling it a masterpiece because after Madam Web, it is considered a masterpiece. And bro, what the hell? So let's talk about the shitstorm of Madam Web finally, now that we've established this Sony Marvel weird relationship thing where you're taking custody of Spider-Man, and it's just, you're abusing the system. You're abusing your powers. So who is Madam Web? I don't know a whole lot about her. I know that she exists. I was first introduced to her in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, and she has made appearances in the Spider-Man comic books. But to give you a sense of who she is, Madam Web is an elderly woman who is intact with the Spider Universe through this webbing-like construct, where she's able to kind of see everything in a clairvoyant-like structure, and she's also able to see the future. She's bound to a chair because of paralysis, and she is blind, so she is known to be a very elderly woman within the Spider-Man universe. And she serves as kind of a mentor to Peter Parker. She is someone who is very much like a Doctor Strange or Charles Xavier of the Spider-Man universe, where she helps guide Peter Parker to do the right thing and not necessarily be too selfish in the realm of Peter Parker and do the right thing as Spider-Man. And for whatever reason, Sony thought that they should take this character and give her her own fucking movie. And she's not even fucking elderly. She is played by none other than Dakota Johnson. Sony, why are you taking actors and actresses from your movies and implementing them into your other movies like you did with Tom Holland and Spider-Man and putting him in Uncharted? You do know that you can hire other actors, right? So basically, this is an origin story of Madam Web. And there's a lot you can do with this because Madam Web is already pretty much a vague character, so you have the realm of doing whatever you want and having the liberty and freedom of making, you know, a pretty good and decent character. I know at first I'm commentating like it doesn't really make sense on paper that Dakota Johnson is playing this elderly character, but you know, this is an origin story, so maybe there is something that they could do from this. And for the most part, there are some really cool ideas in this movie. I will give it that. It's essentially like That's a Raven or Final Destination, because you have a character who is able to see glimpses into the future, and she has the ability to change the future and save lives. Unfortunately, the movie does it in this very just god-awful way, which let's just get into this movie. I have to talk about the movie in depth, so if you haven't seen the movie, don't go see it, but I'm going to talk about the movie in case you want to see it, so let's talk about it. So the movie revolves around Dakota Johnson playing this paramedic ambulance driver known as Cassandra Web. Wow. The entirety of the film takes place in 2003 with some flashbacks in 1970 when Cassandra is born. And as I was watching the film, I was like, wow, this takes place in 2003. This is like a year after Spider-Man. Are we going to be seeing a cameo from like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man? That would be really cool. No. And here's why. Adam Scott is in the film as her partner paramedic, and he is playing Ben Parker. That's right. Uncle Ben. This is a younger Uncle Ben in his prime, and essentially this is before the birth of Peter Parker. Ben Parker is talking throughout this film about how his sister Mary is about to have a child. And this really complicates the Spider-Man multiverse franchise live action wise and Sony, and here's why. Because, you know, we all know that there's at least 3 live action Spider-Man universes that we know of, and multiple ones that might exist. We'll get into that. So we have Tobey Maguire's universe, we have Andrew Garfield's universe, and we have Tom Holland's universe, which is the MCU itself. And there have been speculations that Venom might actually be in the universe of Andrew Garfield because there is a lot of similar shots, and because Venom already appeared in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 3, and at the end of Venom 2, Eddie Brock teleports to Tom Holland's universe. So that narrows out 2 universes, so it's led to believe like, oh, okay, well, he must be in the Andrew Garfield universe. And because Morbius made an I am Venom joke, it leads you to believe like, oh, I guess Morbius is also in the Andrew Garfield universe. Madam Web complicates this more because now this is essentially a 4th universe. It was reported recently that Madam Web was originally supposed to take place in the 1990s, and it was going to lead up to Andrew Garfield being in this universe because in the 90s he would have been born, and in 2012 he would have been a teenage Spider-Man. So there would have been somewhat of a connection there, but for whatever reason, Sony decided to scrap this, and now we just have a random 4th universe where Peter Parker is born in 2003, and he's not even going to be 15 until 2018. So that narrows out the possibility of this even being related to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And I gotta say, Ben Parker and Mary Parker being pregnant with Peter Parker does nothing in this film. It's just something that Sony added because they could. They recognize, oh, okay, like, you know, it's a Spider-Man universe. We got to have him somewhat in there. Oh my God. Okay, so the film fails as like an Easter egg Marvel film. Okay, whatever. How is the actual film itself? Let's start with the characters. How are the characters? They're awful. Dakota Johnson is awful. If you've seen her in 50 Shades of Grey, it's the same type of performance. It's very monotone. You feel like she is on a reality show on Bravo or whatever. Her dialogue is just not spontaneous and everything, and it just feels like she is there being a regular, just, oh my God.
You have a winning personality. I guess I got yours by mistake.
The character doesn't correlate with the actual actions that she does. So in the film, she is a paramedic. So you would think that her being a paramedic and driving an ambulance, you would think that she cares about people. No, actually, she is the most inept person when it comes to like human interaction and stuff like that. She actually saves like a woman by driving her to the hospital, and the woman's son brings her a drawing like, hey, thanks for saving my mom. And she's like, what do I do with this? And Ben's like, well, fuck, just take it. He's saying thank you, dumbass. Another example of this is that Ben Parker invites her to Mary Parker's baby shower because he realizes that she was a foster child and that she needs like family around her. And she kind of just dismisses this as like, why do I have to go? Like, why do I have to be around people? Like, this is, can't I just stay home and stuff like that? You kind of dislike her from the go. It really doesn't make sense as to why she's a paramedic saving people because, you know, you kind of see that she just doesn't give a shit about people overall. The character's occupation and her feeling towards people, just there isn't a connect there. If she cared about people, like, at least that would be something and we would somewhat like the character, but this is just a very poorly developed character. So after trying to save a person, which I don't know why she's trying to save people in the first place because apparently she just doesn't care about people, she's in a car that falls off a bridge, and this triggers her to finally gain her spider abilities, and she gains these powers where she's able to basically see the future. And I gotta say, this portion of the film is pretty bad too. Now, again, this would have been a great idea to implement like a That's So Raven, Final Destination type of feel where you have a character seeing glimpses of the future and she has the ability to stop whatever is happening and change the course of characters' lives. One of the key things that makes these type of movies or shows compelling is that sometimes when a character is witnessing something, they don't know that it's a vision at first. They just think that they're experiencing everything in real time, and then all of a sudden things kind of rewind or they settle back into reality and they start seeing things replay in front of them. However, in this film, when she sees visions, everything is so glitchy and just edited in a way where it's like, oh, okay, she's seeing a vision. And we're never second guessing ourselves as audience members to, oh, well, what if like this is a vision or she's experiencing this in real time? We always know when she's seeing something in the future, and it takes away that second guessing factor from the audience because we're not trying to guess or interpret where the film is going or where we're at a certain point of time. It would be cool if like we experience like a character dying or something like that, and it really like affected us as an audience member, and then it rewinds and we're back to like the actual present moment and we're like, we have that relief, we're like, oh, thank God, like I didn't know that was a vision. But we know it's a vision because everything is incredibly glitchy in the film, and this film's editing is god-awful. There's like millisecond shots where characters are conversing and just added audio dialogue that you can tell is added in post because you could tell that they needed certain exposition that they didn't film during the production, and there were changes during post-production, and they needed to add like, you know, audio dialogue to like make it make sense. So let's talk about the movie's villain, Ezekiel, which has nothing to do with the fucking character from the comics. So Ezekiel is another character that I'm not fully aware of, but I'll try to explain him a little bit. So Ezekiel is a spider-like character that comes into Peter Parker's life, where he tries to explain to Peter Parker that spider-like characters have been a running thing for thousands of years. And he presents this question of, hey, did you ever think that the radioactive spider that bit you, did you ever think that maybe there was something special about the spider before it was hit with that radioactive blast? And it kind of changes Peter Parker's perspective in the comics, and it makes him wonder, like, man, what if I got these powers from something magical and mythical and not something from the realm of sci-fi? Ezekiel also opens Peter Parker's eyes in the realm of, hey, have you ever noticed that a lot of your villains are animal-like? Like there are scorpions, there are octopuses, there are lizards. And he basically explains to Peter Parker that we all have our role in the universe. And from time to time, we will all encompass like who we're supposed to be from a spiritual, animalistic level. And in this case, Peter Parker is this generation's spider-like warrior and stuff. So it's a very interesting concept that the comic explores, and unfortunately the movie goes into this direction where we have this mentor-like character from the comics turned into this very generic fucking villain, where he is essentially, in the 1970s, he found a spider in Peru that gave this tribe like their spider powers, and he found this spider, and to get this spider he killed Cassandra's mother, who was pregnant with her at the time, but that's okay because he found this spider that's going to make him somewhat immortal, or at least age not so rapidly. Because Ezekiel was bitten by this spider, he also from time to time receives visions from the future. And boy, we really got to talk about that too. So in this movie, from the trailers, it's presented that this is going to be a movie that first introduces us to multiple Spider Women. That was actually the most appealing part of the trailer, where I was like, oh, okay, so we're finally getting a Spider-Man spin-off film where we have spider people. We're getting Spider Women in their Spider Women costumes, and they look somewhat good for the most part. That was the most appealing part of the trailer. Well, guess what? That doesn't actually happen in the movie. These are all dream sequences. And there were speculations that these were dream sequences because in the trailer, they had like this like out of focus vignette, and people were speculating like, oh, that's kind of a weird like editing choice. Like, why is that there? And then people started putting together like, oh, well, maybe it's just a dream sequence of like the future because Madam Web is like seeing the future. And people were like, no, they wouldn't do that. They fucking did. Let's kind of step back for a little bit. Let's talk about why Marvel is actually really successful with their movies for a second. The reason why Marvel movies are really good is because sometimes they kind of over-deliver, like Captain America Civil War. Not only is that a Captain America Winter Soldier type of movie, we're also getting Iron Man. We're also getting half of the Avengers in that film. The reason why Thor Ragnarok was commercially successful was because not only were we getting Thor on this barbaric planet, but it was an opportunity to have Hulk in there as well and implement the storyline of Planet Hulk. So you got Thor, you got Hulk, you even got a cameo from Doctor Strange. Even with the new Captain America Brave New World that's coming out next year with Sam Wilson, we're getting Red Hulk. And that's the joy of a movie being in a comic book cinematic universe, is because we have all these different characters joining us along the way. However, unfortunately, this movie is focused on Madam Web, and we can't even have fucking Spider Women in it. And to top it all off, Madam Web is just not that strong of a character. She is meant to be there in the comics as a mentor to anybody who has spider-like abilities and to help them on their journey to becoming a better superhero. I think what they should have done is they should have made a Spider-Woman movie, like with Jessica Drew, and have Madam Web be that guide to her becoming a better superhero. I think that would have been a much more impactful movie. Then, if Spider-Woman was a successful movie, you could have had a Spider-Woman 2 where you had these 3 other Spider-Women come into play, very much like Captain Marvel, but maybe a little bit better. I don't understand why in 2024, we're still getting comic book movies that don't have superheroes in them. So these are dreams that Ezekiel is having. He has these dreams where these 3 Spider Women come together at his apartment and they kill him and they take his spider. He has this nightmare reoccurring. And this is all explained in very, very, very heavy exposition because he had a nightmare next to a woman that he's sleeping with, and he's able to explain to this woman why he's having this nightmare, thus explaining it to the audience, treating the audience like they're just fucking idiotic people and they can't put 2 and 2 together. This movie really doesn't believe in show and don't tell. There is a lot of exposition heavy stuff. Cassandra has a journal under her bed that basically tells her and us the story of her mother and why she was in Peru in the first place studying spiders. And it's just it's so fucking lazy. I absolutely hate it. And here's another reason why the movie is lazy. So it's the reason why Ezekiel is trying to hunt down these teenagers who will one day become these Spider Women is because he's having this dream, right? He's having this dream that they visit him at his apartment complex. Why don't you just fucking move? Like, if the same vision is of you, like, dying in this apartment complex, why don't you just get like a bunker? Why do you feel the necessity to go out and kill 3 teenage girls because you keep having dreams? Like, if you're having dreams of like 3 women killing you in your apartment, you probably wouldn't stay at that apartment anymore. Like, maybe you would at least move once and see if that does anything. It's like he moves and he's like, oh, I'm not having nightmares anymore. Okay, cool. I don't have to kill 3 teenage girls. It's so fucking lazy. This all could have been like prevented if he just were to fucking move. He has the money. Just move into a bunker. Or at the very least, like, just find these women like, hey, just, you're gonna grow up one day. Don't kill me. Here's some money. Like, just something. And let's talk about these 3 Spider Women, or these teenagers that grow up to be Spider Women, because I have to remind myself there's not actually Spider Women in a Spider-Man movie. I mean, I can't push Sony to be creative, so there's just not any fucking Spider Women in a Spider-Man fucking movie, I guess. So the best thing that this movie can do is to at least give us likable characters. If the script is bad, if the story structure is bad, at the very least, like, we can relate to some given characters. However, like Madam Web herself, these characters are still really, really bad. There's a character that plays Maddie Franklin who is skateboarding down this busy New York street, and Cassandra is an ambulance driver, and she's driving down this street trying to get a patient to the hospital, and this fucking kid gets in front of her with her skateboard, and the kid flips her off. Bro, like, do you not understand that ambulance drivers, like, have jobs and they're trying to get, like, people to the hospital before they fucking die? Fuck you. Sydney Sweeney is fine as Julia Cornwall in this film. She is basically, like, the shy character, which is very surprising to me while watching it, because after seeing, like, a lot of other Sydney Sweeney works, just seeing her as a shy character, I was like, oh, okay, well, at least, like, they're doing something different with this actress. There's also Isabella Merced as Anya Corazon, who plays the Spanish Spider-Woman, or the person who becomes the Spanish Spider-Woman. You see what I mean? Like, it would have been cool if we just gotten these characters from the get-go. Like, why do we have to see, like, precursors of characters that we should be getting in the time of, like, where superhero movies are just banging right now? But for the most part, these teenagers who become Spider-Women in the future, they're awful. Like, there's not a likable factor about them. I'm gonna sound old when saying this. They're just annoying, disrespectful teenagers. There's a part in the movie where they're just at a diner and they just start dancing on tabletops in front of these boys. And then there's another part within the film where they're in hiding and they're staying at Uncle Ben's house to not be caught by surveillance cameras so this Ezekiel character can find them. And they're just, like, throwing popcorn everywhere. And Ben's like, hey, maybe we can just tidy up a little bit. Like, Ben Parker. When you think of Ben Parker, you think of that nice uncle from Spider-Man, and just the fact that, like, they're disrespecting this character is so sad. When moving into this story plot of this guy trying to find these 3 girls to kill them, you want to feel for these girls. You want to make sure that they don't die. You want them to be likable. But the movie just doesn't do that. You kind of dislike them. The movie also has no sense of time whatsoever. So there's a part in this film where Cassandra brings these 3 teenagers out into the woods because they're trying to stay away from cameras, because that's how Ezekiel is finding these women. And she's having a realization that this is all spider connected. And she's like, I'll be right back. She goes back to her apartment in New York to find this journal that was under her bed that explains the plot further about how her mother was studying spiders in the Amazon, and she had to go all the way to her apartment to have this exposition scene. It's this whole scene where she has to drive there, take the license plate off because she's wanted by the police, and she has to find this journal, and she's left these 3 teenage girls in the woods. There's another part, again, like I stated, where she has to leave these girls to stay with Ben Parker, and she's like, I gotta go to Peru. I'm gonna be gone for a week. And it's just like, it's such a serious thing where it's like, oh yeah, no, that's a week. A lot can happen within that time frame. It's just, the movie, the pacing of the film is just awful, and it expects us to believe that, like, oh, you're just going to showcase this amount of time happening and not have any repercussions happen whatsoever within the span of that week. And finally, I have to talk about the climax. This movie, so in Spider-Man No Way Home, the climax takes place at the Statue of Liberty. Sony saw that and they were like, oh, well, we probably need to have, like, a nice monument like setting for this climax to happen in Madam Web. So what do they do in contrast to the Statue of Liberty scene in Spider-Man No Way Home? They have this climax take place at a fucking Pepsi Cola factory. Because they were like, you know, there's a scene where Dakota Johnson has a Pepsi can at a barbecue. So, oh, that's good product placement. That's kind of subtle. Let's do it again. Let's have the fucking... let's have the climax happen at a Pepsi Cola factory. Because it's, you know, it's... So the movie ends with Cassandra trying to save the 3 Spider-Women from Ezekiel, and she falls into the water and, like, debris from the Pepsi Cola factory. Okay, I'm sorry. Debris. Wow. Debris from the Pepsi Cola factory hits her in the face, and it blinds her. And I guess she's also paralyzed too, even though, like, it kind of hits her in the face, and that wasn't very clear. Like, oh, I guess it also paralyzed her as well. Peter Parker is also born in a hospital, which is like, okay, that's cool, I guess. And then she adopts these 3 Spider Women. I don't know if they're Spider Women yet. She just adopts these 3 women, and she has a glimpse of the future where they're wearing very shitty cosplay outfits. Like Madam Web's costume, it's very bad. Like I don't know what they were thinking. That was like almost as if it was last minute. You gave her a costume, you were like, hey, wear this, let's shoot it on an iPhone for a second in a green screen. Like it was probably one of the worst shots I have ever seen. Like, it was so forced. Guys, this movie was horrific. It was awful. It's also not doing well at the box office. Since today, I'm filming this on Sunday. I don't know when this video is going to be posted, but the movie made only $50 million, and that's not domestic. That's global, baby. It's being reported that nothing like this has ever happened since, like, Elektra from the mid 2000s. Like, again, yeah, the fact that like we're getting a movie to this stature like Catwoman or Elektra in 2024, when we thought that we have just evolved in terms of like superhero films. Like, we're past this. Sony, why are you still making these films? And that's another thing. I know I talked a lot about Madam Web, and I said I wanted to talk about Sony, and I know I talked a lot about Madam Web. Let's finally talk about just Sony and what they should do, because clearly something isn't working. And there's another movie coming out soon. That's Kraven the Hunter, starring Aaron Taylor Johnson. I don't want to see that. I might for content, but I don't want to see that. But yeah, no, honestly, it's a little sad because Spider-Man is such an amazing character, and there are a lot of cool things that Sony is doing with the Spider-Man IP. The Spider-Verse animated films are super successful. I can't wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse. These Spider-Man video games on PlayStation, like, have a good handle of what Spider-Man is all about. I don't understand why the movies can't be like this right now. Like, I think Sony is just so scared of making another iteration of Spider-Man because they know that Spider-Man is being used by the MCU. But it's like, we're kind of at a time now where we kind of understand that there's different iterations and adaptations of different superheroes. Like, we got the Batman in 2022, and in 2023 in The Flash, we got Ben Affleck as Batman yet again, and Michael Keaton as Batman yet again. We're all aware of what the multiverse is now at this point. Why are you focusing on secondary characters? Why are you scared to have your own version of Spider-Man? This movie at one point was written to have Andrew Garfield in your film. And I love Andrew Garfield. I think he's a great Spider-Man. He obviously loves the character. I would love to see him interact with some of these characters, or just have sequels to his franchise and have these characters come into play. I'd love to see him verse Venom and Carnage. I'd love for him to even have a mentor-like character like Madam Web. And if not Andrew Garfield, just do another interpretation of Spider-Man. So we have a reason to go see these films, and we have a reason to like these characters on a secondary level, because they're interacting with Spider-Man, because they're in a Spider-Man universe. What the hell are you doing, Sony? This is definitely one of the worst superhero films that I've ever seen, and the worst part is, it had promise. You could have utilized this to push more female-related Spider-Man movies. Because of this film, they're having to rewrite Silk, the Amazon show that was announced. I don't know if it was in direct correspondence with Madam Web, but they just announced that they're trying to rewrite the Silk Amazon show, and I think it's probably due to the fact of how this movie performed. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what needs to happen. All I know is I like Spider-Man. The sad thing is that Sony really doesn't realize what they have. Sony has this catalog of Spider-Man characters that they can utilize. They have Miles Morales as Spider-Man. They have Spider-Man 2099. They have Spider-Man Noir. I believe that they are making a Spider-Man Miles Morales movie, and they're also making a Spider-Man Noir movie, which, by the way, Nicolas Cage is also very keen on being involved in. I don't know. I just want to see the Spider-Man franchise progress. I'm just sick and tired of these movies being made because Sony realizes that if they don't make another movie in 5 years, they could lose the rights to Spider-Man. I'm just sick and tired of this mentality. Make actual good films. Make films that people want to see. I think the next step is, I don't know, make a Spider-Man film with an actual Spider-Man character in it. That's the first step. As of now, I'm getting really sick and tired of these Sony films. So yeah, I know I was kind of rambling, but thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch the end of this video. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe yet if you haven't to the channel. Yeah, this one was I had to get through this one for sure. Stay tuned for more videos. I'm Corbin Stuckey, and thanks for watching.